Thank you, Angel. Thank you, Fernando. We've only got about 15 minutes, so I'm going to ask one question, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience. I have several more, but I'm going to try and be judicious with my own queries. And this is for either one of you, but you started the presentation by highlighting some of the market headlines that actually were either misleading or exaggerated, but which told a story, and it was up to Spain and others to try and refute those misconceptions. So I think the one that was the most acute and the one that required ultimately intervention through the FROB and through the international community is the vulnerability of the banking sector.
Sorry?
And it was touched upon, but I just wanted to ask you to explore that. Slide 15 mentioned the total capital needs for the banks. And so, yes, it came in below what many market analysts expected it to be or feared it could be. But what's your response today in April 2013 to those who say, yes, we've exposed the vulnerabilities of the banking sector and addressed them, but we're not sure we've really seen the end of that story? Is there more potential for other shoes to drop within the financial sector?
No.
Now you do.
Yes. Okay. So basically, yes, it's one of the challenges that remain. There has been progress. I think the IMF review, or the latest review of the program, or the implicit program in the financial sector, was positive and successful. Just a couple of numbers, right? The exposures on real estate are provisioned to almost 100%. So, there is room for disappointment. There is always room for disappointment, but at least the margin now seems to be much smaller than it was. There has been a big reduction in capacity. There was about 50 plus banks a couple of years ago. You have less than 20 right now. There has been an important reduction in branches, over 10% reduction in branches. The level of non-performing loans in mortgages is just 3.5%. This was a big point of contention a year and a half ago, where the official estimates would say that mortgages were safe because of the way the underwriting takes place in Spain, and the market would say triple that. Look at Ireland; it's going to be like Ireland. Well, it remains low. 3.5% NPLs for mortgages is low. The average loan to value, as far as I understand it, is around 55–60%. It looks okay. So there are always vulnerabilities. There is probably going to have to be a further work towards meeting the Basel III commitments and requirements. But the important thing, I think, is that the banks that have not been subject to restructuring manage about 70% of the assets of the Spanish banking sector. That gives you, I think, a solid ground on which to stand, and that you can look forward to a solid performance there.
Yes, yeah, and I think that Spain has been the country has been more controlled. Several stress tests with also the inspectors of the Monetary Union, and they control the 95% of the entities. No? For example, in Germany, they only control 60%. And then after these controls, as you see before in the chart, only 5.6% of the GDP has been necessary for financing the bad situation. No? Then with all these reforms, we think that we can see that at the end of the year, it's possible that we return the liquidity in the SMS companies that we need.
Okay, I've got a number of other questions, but I'm going to throw it out to the audience first, and then is there anybody out there who has a burning question or a less than burning question? Please. Just hit if you can go to the mic, please. And identify yourself if you could before you ask the question.
Good morning. My name is Silvia Ayuso. I'm a correspondent for the German press agency. My question is, you're putting a somewhat more positive perspective for Spain, but now you haven't touched, I know you're talking from a business perspective, and I understand that. My question is, now that there are more cases, at least denounced of corruption, how this, and it's become one of the most biggest worries for the Spanish, according to polls, how afraid or worried are you that these cases, regardless of if they are in the end true or not, might affect the trust in making businesses in Spain?
Well, I think that that means at the moment that we are a democratic country, and the justice is on, no, for everybody. I think it's very particularly important that at the moment the justice, you can think perhaps that is a little slow, but nevertheless it's working, and that it is a demonstration that at the moment nobody is out of the bad situations. No? I think it's a fact that we expect, and I think that everybody learned the lesson, and we expect that in the future we don't have more these cases. But the more important thing is that justice was gone. And also the knowledge that we have is not more different than the corruption in other countries. Similar to France, you see all the presidents of France are now in a situation that there are not that good situation also. No? Then we think that it's not different in the other countries, and well, the justice is working on.
Okay. Please.
I'm Rafael Espinoza. I'm from the IMF. I have a question about the unemployment, and in particular the unemployment of the unskilled workers. And that relates also to the sectors of the economy that could grow in the future. What is your view about what could Spain do about them? The construction sector is pretty much reduced by half and will stay so for some years. What are the sectors that could grow and attract and take this unskilled labor force? Unskilled and these are one of the countries with the lowest, with the highest high school dropout in the OECD. So they are really unskilled workers. And what are the reforms that the government could take to facilitate the employment of these workers?
Well, those numbers are correct, but I think what is important to understand is that there was this big move of youngsters from school into the construction sector, right? It was part of the process of the real estate boom. Many of them are now back into school. So it's going to be a long process of raising their education level, as you are saying. There is a large share of unskilled, but those are now back in school. There is going to be an improvement in their education level, and that is going to be with more progress in the labor market reforms that are going to be more attractive to hire some of these workers, especially making them more attractive to hire them as permanent workers so they can receive more on-the-job training and a better improvement of skills. As the economy picks up, they will be able to return to the labor force the same way that it's happening in many other places. I don't think Spain is particularly different, with the exception of the big chunk of people who moved too early in hindsight from school into the labor market, and that now has returned.
Yes, it's our challenge. It's this challenge. The 50% of the employees in our country, there are people come from the construction sector, no, direct or indirect, no. And then we are the government and the companies. You are spending a lot of money to do education to reconverse these people in other sectors. No, the agriculture could be one of them, but will be not a quick process, a fast process. No, but we are in the challenge. We are we have the commitment. We know the problem, and we think that in the next year that has been to resolve.
Anders.
Anders Åslund, Peterson Institute. My question is for Hel, since nobody else takes up European Commission in-depth review that came out the day before yesterday. They particularly single out two countries, first Slovenia and second Spain, for excessive macroeconomic imbalances. And where particular judgment is rigidities in the product and labor markets contribute to high and rising unemployment and more generally hinder the adjustment of the economy. Could you elaborate on this? Have professions been liberalized in Spain? One of the easiest way to reduce youth unemployment is normally to liberalize shop hours and introduce simplified taxation for small entrepreneurs. Have civil servants been sacked? That's one of the most simple things of checking if elementary equity has been done to the bureaucracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Anders. And this is, when I was speaking about the sort of dual economy, that's exactly the point, right? There is a part of Spain that is very competitive because they compete in outside markets. There is a part of the economy that is protected, and it's protected, among other things, because the development of the regional economic system in Spain has led to a lot of barriers for the internal market in Spain, because competencies on many of these areas were transferred to the regions. Now what you have is a very complex web of regulations that makes transactions across regions and even employment across regions reasonably complex. One of the reform proposals of the government, as far as I understand, is essentially to lower these barriers and to facilitate the transfer of not just commerce but also employment across the regions. This is going to be something that, if it's put in place, is going to be quite helpful. The other thing, as you said, is the liberalization of the professions. I think there is an effort going on. I don't think it has been done yet, and I suspect one of the issues the Commission raises is more the speed of implementation rather than the concept. A lot of these things have been announced, they are in place, they just have to be approved. It's the direction that is going, but absolutely they need to move in this direction, no question.
Now we will see in a few days, we will see the plan of reforms that Mr. Rajoy has to present to the European Union. And we are sure that all of these reforms will take place, and there are the commitment for everybody that the implementation of all these reforms in the unity of the market, and also liberation of the professionals, and a new law to the support to the entrepreneurs, etc.
If I could just interject, just picking up on this, both in the presentation and in this most recent set of answers, we're talking about the reforms that have already been undertaken at the structural level and that may continue to be implemented. How many of those are enshrined in whatever Spain's equivalent of a constitution or permanent law, or how many of those could, under a potential change of government, I'm not predicting this, I'm just saying over time, if you had a new government, how many of those can be modified or reversed, and how many of those, like in the case of Italy, are basically enshrined so that a political change does not impact the structural reforms that are already on the table or already implemented?
What is entrenched in the Constitution is the fiscal part, right? The constitutional change, I should have mentioned this in the presentation, the constitutional amendment that Spain put in place a year or two ago is probably the most aggressive out there, because not only it entrenches in the Constitution the balanced budget and the commitments to the European recommendations, but it also introduces the prioritization of debt service. That is now written in the constitutional amendment. It's going to be articulated in organic laws, but essentially that will not be changed unless you change the Constitution again. The other reforms are not at the constitutional level, but frankly, I don't think there is the political will in Spain now to change any, especially the direction of the process, no matter who is in charge.
Well, one chance that you have now, that is the parties in the government has the majority of the votes, and then I think this is a positive factor that he can to establish new laws, and no problem because he has the majority in the parliament. No, and until I think the next elections could be in November 2015, and they have time. And I expect that at this time, the crisis is not like now, that we will grow GDP, not very much, but we will grow, and then I think the people don't want to change if the economy continues to grow. what we expect. No? We expect that next year little growth, 0.8, and we expect we continues in 2015. Then, well, all the macro situation could be more positive to continue the reforms that has been adopted in these years.
We have time for one last question, if we have one. That's all.
Thank you. We've seen since the outset of this year a marked improvement in financial market and financial conditions, which I think quite hopefully, I think it's very positively, it has been quite resilient to bad news, and I think that's a change, because that shows that the market dynamics have changed. But we still haven't seen this improvement in financial conditions feeding through the real economy. What do you think is the kind of key element in that process for the real economy to improve? And as you said in the presentation, for private investment to stabilize and then take off and join exports and then start the kind of this recovery process that we hope to see and you hope to see next year? Thank you.
Well, I do think it has fed into the real economy in the sense that markets have opened up and large companies have been able to issue and have been able to issue in very good terms. And part of the reason why this export performance is also improving is because the funding for the exporting sector is also improving. What needs to be opened up now is the small and medium companies. There are, as far as I understand, a couple of initiatives out there that are going to help from the point of view of governments, maybe the European Investment Bank, maybe even the European Central Bank. That's what needs to happen. You need to get to the deeper part of the economy that maybe is suffering from some restrictions in credit. Now, as I think I mentioned in the presentation, the companies, however small, that present good plans, I think are getting credit. That's what the data shows in Spain. It's a question of whether you had a good plan. But from the point of view of opening up of markets and the impact on the real economy, I think that's already happening.
I think also one important thing is that the reforms in the European Union has done. No? For example, the banking union in the European, because now we have more interest rate in our companies than our competitive partners. And nevertheless, we are exporting and we are growing in our exportation. Then if our financing cost was similar to the competitiveness, I think we will be more competitive than now. I think one of the important things is also that the European Union stabilize all the financing situation. No?